is the Minister of Infrastructure in Rwanda, Mr. Jimmy Gasori. Thank you so much for joining us on this
Thank
short
you.
conversation. And he also happens to be the president of the 40th Irena Assembly this year. But thank you so much for all you do. And we just have a couple of things to talk about. So, with respect to Rwanda's energy mix, I know you're already doing things around solar, hydro as well. But how is that coming? It would be great to also understand your contributions and the expectations as the years evolve.
Yeah, thank you. Rwandan energy mix. We currently have renewable energy at 55%, and most of which is hydro. But also we have a significant share of solar energy systems in Rwanda. Currently, 23% of population use solar energy to light up their homes. The main direction is to increase the share of hydro in Rwanda and the renewable energies. Currently, we have three main projects on the way. We are commissioning one big power plant of 80 megawatts, which is shared by Tanzania and Burundi. We are in development of another power plant. This is hydro again, of 47 megawatts. And we are planning another one of 206 megawatts. That one will be shared by DR Congo and Burundi. So that are the plans. And we have also decommissioned last year, summer last year, we have decommissioned all the power plants that were using fuel, fossil fuel, to even make greener our energy supply.
I mean, I like that you talked about a couple that you're also, sharing in different with other countries, and that makes me sort of wonder in terms of the infrastructure for all of this sharing. How is that coming along?
Yes, we have already implemented multiple sharing infrastructure projects.
Ah,
I think the first one started in 1990s.
okay.
That was shared between DR Congo and
Okay.
Burundi. So that one is still in operation. Recently, we have commissioned the Rusumo. This is the east part of Rwanda, which integrates. It's a shared power plant between Tanzania, Rwanda, and Uganda, and Burundi. But also, in that, we have a built mechanism to trade electricity between ourselves.
So,
And we are already sharing with Uganda and Kenya. So,
okay,
the,
okay.
kind of our network
It's
has
a
already
community,
integrated.
fantastic.
Yeah.
I think that's something that the West African region can actually, adopt and learn since it's a working structure already for you. But in terms of those still in Rwanda who are perhaps not even connected to the national grid in any form, what are those mechanisms and measures to ensure that they have access to renewable energy options?
Yes, we have about 23% of population households who are powered by renewable, especially standalone solar home systems. These are subsidized systems. So we have integrated with the banks and energy private developers. It's an umbrella of private companies operating in home solar systems, so that we alleviated the initial cost of investing and setting up the solar system, home solar system. With that, with integration of technology, we first select those who are eligible, depending on their income level, because it's heavily subsidized. We install the home solar kit for free,
Wow.
then they will pay as they consume. Of course, we have to enforce. So all those private developers, they will put in the technology that allows the remote control of the home solar kit, so that it can cut power if the user doesn't pay. But a big share is paid for by the government, and another share for ownership is paid by the users.
Fantastic. And finally, before I let you go, what would you say that your key takeaways from the 14th General Assembly? I mean, given that you are also the president of this year's assembly.
Yes, my key takeaway is the momentum that I have seen. It's a momentum that was generated during the COP28.
Absolutely.
It was the highest level commitment, consensus, to triple renewable energy by 2030. Here is to reaffirm our commitment, but also discuss ways to move towards implementation. At the end, we need to see this implemented, and the clock is ticking. We have only 6 years left to reach 2030. So the takeaway is further collaboration, especially with the financial institutions, so that we make the vision that was established at COP28 into a reality.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jimmy Gasoro, the Minister of Infrastructure in Rwanda and the President of the Arena 14th Assembly. Thank you for joining
Thank
us.
you. It was a pleasure
Absolutely,
talking to you.
absolutely. Thank you.
Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates. Good afternoon. I hope you had a very pleasant lunch. I declare open this session of the afternoon. Firstly, let me introduce myself. My name is Margarita Arabidze from the Ministry of Economy and Sustainable Development of Georgia. As you are aware, Georgia is the Vice President this year. I would like to start in thanking the President of the Assembly for inviting me to preside over this plenary session. Now I invite the Assembly to turn to agenda item 15, plenary session on policies and skills for the acceleration energy transition. Please and kind reminder that the Assembly has before its background document with the same title contained in A/14/B/N/6. This plenary session will explore and identify priority actions that are needed to achieve the COP28 target of tripling renewable energy projects power capacity by 2030, with a focus on the two key enablers, policies and skills. It will examine the deployment and the enabling policies that can support the delivery of the required scale-up as well as measures to address potential skills and shortages. This will include the
The CEO of Meso Global, Ruud Krakman, who is from the Netherlands. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm also here with my colleague Kingsley. We know that Meso Global operates across various countries, and to be more specific, in Nigeria, Cross River State. Do you want to share a bit about the energy projects that are going on within this region?
Yes, we have an ongoing project in Cross River State. That's two megawatts for each hybrid solution that we're providing. It's a solar energy storage and backup generator system. So a school, an airport can run completely autonomously. And it's an ongoing process, so it will be multiple projects after this. So we're very pleased with this project. And also we're looking at a further expansion in the Nigerian market.
Yes, so beyond the Nigerian markets, what is your vision for the African market generally? And then speak specifically to the projects you have with Cross River State governments in extension to the other African countries you're trying to explore.
Well, the thing is in Africa and also in Nigeria, there is a lack of a stable energy source. So if you look at Nigeria, roughly 30 million people, only 5% have access to a stable grid. We provide a renewable power solution. So the solutions that we provide are 24/7 power supply. It's not only during the day when you have solar, we store the energy, we have a backup system, so it's very secure. And the opportunity is big. And the systems that we provide, and we produce in the Netherlands and in India, we're also going to produce in Saudi. We can bring it to all the African countries. So the demand is the same. But it's very important if you want to implement these systems that it has to be affordable. So we are a company that's Dutch engineering, but we get our materials directly from the source in Asia and in India, and that makes it very accessible for especially also African market, Nigeria market. And the interesting thing is for Nigeria and also other African countries is that they can immediately take the step from no grid to renewable power sources. So that there is no investment in a grid. They can immediately go with local solar plants, energy storage, hydrogen, and we are a part of this development. That we're proud of it.
Yeah. So across the African countries, what's your plan generally?
We have a lot of. I visit a lot of countries. I've even been to the jungles of Guinea. I visit South Africa. I've seen a lot for the World Bank. We visit a lot of places, tough places, people who don't have access to any power source. Nigeria, I've been there many times, and looking at the good collaboration with Cross River State and the government access to this project is also getting the door open to local entrepreneurs, local companies, giving them an affordable solution that's fitable for their market. That will happen also in countries like Guinea, Rwanda. South Africa is more stable, but there are other countries. So we're looking forward to the expansion in Africa. And we're looking forward to setting up an office in Nigeria and use that and get young professionals at this office, engineers, sales engineers, project management, to get these projects going in South Africa and Guinea and Nigeria. But that's the approach. And we're working on that for several years, and it's going very well.
It's interesting because when we met at the assembly, you mentioned you were from the Netherlands, and I had hosted the solar marketplace launch for the Netherlands embassy in Nigeria, sometime last year. And so when you told me you were also investing, ensuring that there's that level of energy supply, I know that the government and the embassies are trying to work together to see how. I know that the government, and the embassies are trying to work together to see how they can leverage, each person's strength, between Netherlands and Nigeria to ensure energy access in unserved and underserved communities. So I'd like to know how supportive of your initiatives in Nigeria, how supportive your engagement with the government has been.
It's very good. We had a lot of delegations coming from Nigeria to our company in the Netherlands, visit our factory, seen our solutions. We even had former Governor Ayade from Cross River State had visit our company. So we're very pleased with a visit from His Excellency. The embassy invites us in Nigeria, get acquainted with the local market, get acquainted with the opportunities that are there. And that's where you start, because I travel a lot. I've seen a lot from the world. I enter the market, but it usually starts with the embassy, the collaborations, like here with the arena. That's where it starts. And there is a lot of discussions and possibilities. But we are the next step in these discussions because we deliver the hardware and we even deliver finance solutions if needed. We're talking to Empower, for example, from Scandinavia. So we're delivering the hardware, including the finance. So it's a complete closed model that you can even pay only for the kilowatt hours. So we're not only looking at just being a producer. We're also looking at where is the problem. Financing is the problem. We have a finance solution. Even here in the Middle East, we have partners that can finance projects in Africa. That makes it very interesting. So we can provide the solution, technically provide the hardware and the financing. And the embassy is very interesting because they connect us with the right people.
Now, so you seems to be focusing on growing a value chain.
Yes.
Now, so can you speak to that specifically? Because what we've seen over time is just pure importation, where people do not have interest in actually growing the value chain. How can your solution help to build capacity, local capacity, to also develop industry in Nigeria in such a manner that you're not only importing your goods, you're developing the environment where eventually maybe using Nigeria as a hub for your assembly or manufacturing for the African market?
Yes, that's exactly our strategy. When we started in 2018, I'm now looking at the global market. We visit the African countries, Colombia, India, and the Saudi market. We have established our company in the meantime in India, Colombia. We're doing the same now in Nigeria. We're doing the same at this moment in Saudi. And what we're bringing only we start with the solution and the Dutch technology, but in the later stage we only bring Dutch engineering. So we bring the knowledge to local people. Also in Nigeria, that's what we're going to do. So we train young professionals, set up an office, and then step by step start with pre-assembly, and then in a later stage full assembly in Nigeria. So we'll also set up a factory there, and then we can also adjust our products, for example, to a local market or more suitable market. Do we need to change the product to maybe power up water pumps or maybe other solutions that are needed in the country? Every continent, every country is different.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I've seen a lot from Africa, and I've seen a lot from the world. And the way that Europe is looking at some countries also in Africa is not how it really works. So you have to be in the country, you have to talk to the right people and get acquainted with the market. And then you know exactly where is the need. Is it affordable? Because we can build something very good in the Netherlands, but somebody has to invest. And that's usually the problem. So we're looking at all the assets of all the stakeholders, and we're creating a sustainable market. So we're trying to create a circle. That's it.
But how does the work that you do in the Gulf region really help, with your project implementation in Africa?
That's very interesting because when you look at the Gulf region, there's a very good collaboration with India from the Gulf region. So people from here or from Saudi, because we have such a strong office in India, we are directly sourcing our materials there, like lithium, solar, the backup generators, containerized solutions, inverters, and we can easily bring that here to Saudi and produce the units here and then bring it to Africa. Strategically wise, when you look at the global market, it's way more interesting and lowers the cost price massively if we produce it here and then bring it to Africa, to Nigeria, and then step by step also set up the factory in Nigeria. And then we expand the market there, and that's way more interesting to lower your cost price for the products than try to produce it in Europe. That's what we see. That's how we see the market.
Well, finally, before we let you go, we'd like to know what your CSR projects are. If you're implementing so many projects, then what are you also doing in terms of giving back to the community?
Yeah, the interesting thing is also on our approach is that we will bring the technology and maybe even the finance solution, but we will train local people to maintain it. I've seen also in Africa that you have very interesting solar water pump systems, but nobody in the village, local village, can maintain it. They don't clean the solar panels. Nobody trained them, so it's placed there, and afterwards there is no maintenance program. So what we do is we will train the local people on, okay, you will be assigned. You even can get a paycheck from our company, but you have to maintain it. We will train you. We will bring you to the Netherlands, and then you will make sure that 10 years, 15 years, the whole site, the whole power plant is being maintained. And we're not going to bring people from the Netherlands or India here. We train local people and young professionals, and especially in Nigeria. That's the first step here.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much for
My
joining
pleasure.
us. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
They must be paired with efforts to tap talent among underrepresented groups, including women, youth, and minorities. For instance, it's crucial to acknowledge that the energy industry has long been dominated by men, a trend that extends to varying extents into the realm of renewable energy. ARENA's work has shed light on this, drawing from analysis of the PV industry, which revealed that women occupy 40% of full-time positions. Although this surpasses the 32% average across the entire renewable energy sector and nearly doubles the representation seen in wind energy, the distribution of women across different roles within the solar PV sector remains uneven. While 58% hold administrative positions, Only 32% are in science, technology, engineering, and maths roles. And a mere 17% reach senior management positions. To address these disparities and foster a more inclusive environment, proactive measures are imperative. We must enact effective strategies to facilitate women's entry into the industry and enhance their opportunities for career advancement. This encompasses not only the implementation of better workplace practices, policies, and regulations, but also the establishment of robust networks and support systems tailored to provide training and mentorship for women. IRENA has long advocated for a holistic policy framework to guide the energy transition. This encompasses not only policies to facilitate renewable energy deployment, but also a suite of structural and just transition measures. Crucially, these policies must not be viewed in isolation. They also need to be understood within the context of how society interacts with our planet's delicate ecosystems. Only through such comprehensive, inclusive approaches can we hope to realize a future that is not just prosperous and sustainable, but also equitable and resilient. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Pelico, for very informative and very, very useful information. And now I would like to invite Her Excellency, Dr. Amna bint Abdullah Al Dakhah Al Samshi, Minister of Climate Change and Environmental of United Arab Emirates, to deliver her keynote address. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, it's an honor to address you today at the IRENA Assembly. Allow me to also welcome you again to Abu Dhabi and thank you for joining us here despite some uncharacteristic and challenging weather conditions. This session on policies and skills for an accelerated energy transition is an important one and especially very close to my heart, being coming from education in my previous capacity in the UAE government and working primarily on capacity building programs. And just before this session, I had a very insightful and delightful conversation with the IRENA youth delegate, and I believe that they are really the future decision makers. Education, capacity building, and training are crucial to long-term climate and energy security and our shared prosperity. This is especially the case in developing economies like the United Arab Emirates, where the talent pipeline offers a long-term view of what our future will look like. As such, we are pleased to see that these topics are receiving more attention at important international platforms such as the IRENA Assembly. IRENA's 2023 World Energy Transition Outlook stated that beside infrastructure, a lack of supporting policies, regulations, skills, and institutional capacities are major barriers to a swift and seamless energy transition. As such, the international community must take a more holistic view on the role of governments in shaping policy and regulatory frameworks that maximize local value creation, encourage more young people to enter the energy and renewable energy job market, promote knowledge and technology transfers across sectors and industries. IRENA statistics, which have been shared with some of the esteemed speakers before me, IRENA statistics shows that in the last 10 years, employment in the renewable energy sector has almost doubled. 13.7 million people are already employed in the sector. But by 2030, it is expected that an additional labor force of more than 80 million is required to ensure a successful energy transition. The UAE
I have here with me the CEO, Alliance for Rural Electrification, David Lacock. Thank you so much for joining us on Leader Network here
Thank you
at
for
the
having me.
IRENA 14th Assembly. It's beautiful to see the work, the Alliance for Rural Electrification is doing, but sort of give us a sense as to the plans that ARE has in activating the market for affordable energy services, particularly in Africa, because I know that you do work across the African continent.
Yeah, thank you, Irie, for that question, for having me today on your show. So ARE, as you know, we have around 200 companies that do all the renewable technologies, all the system sizes, and exclusively in emerging markets, particularly sub-Saharan Africa. And so the way that we activate these markets is by working with African companies and international companies, put them together, meet business people, meet investors, and organize pretty much activities in every direction that we can think of to help bring business to them on a silver platter.
And then could you also elaborate on the strategies that ARE employs to create local jobs for people across, this continent?
Certainly. So actually, our main goal with ARE is energy access. Our second main goal is green job creation. And to be complete, the third one is climate mitigation. So it means that in the process of delivering energy access, in the process of helping all these companies in the network build the infrastructure on the ground, it's creating a lot of direct jobs. And then in so doing, it's also creating a lot of indirect jobs. We've recently completed a study, original research with German foundation CAS, precisely on the job impact of distributed renewables in West Africa. I would certainly encourage everybody on the show to have a look at it, and I'm sure we can share it on your channels.
And it will also be good to understand, in terms of your business development support, how does that work, particularly for organizations that work with you?
So the way we are helping the companies is, I would say there's 2-3 different elements. One, we are the industry federation. So it means we're working in a regulated market and a market that requires government support, government investment. This means that we are advocating for the sector at all levels of government. That's one. The second is organize events, delegations, market studies, matchmaking, networking, whatever really we can think of. And that our companies ask us to do. So they get in touch with the right players, that they know about the opportunities and that they can act on them. That is the second way. And then the third way is we are organizing based on, again, what the sector tells us they need, a bunch of trainings, capacity buildings on very specific subjects, typically technical or investment related, to really, again, get that infrastructure deployed, get those companies to do business, and in the process of doing business, deliver access, jobs, and climate mitigation.
Now, during the course of the IRENA Assembly, we've discussed quite a bit about financing, and you have projects across these various African countries. But it would be good to know what your experience has been in ARE.
So for the finance, this is always an interesting question. I think you need to differentiate probably between the different market segments. Generally, the message is still governments need to live up to their promises, need to live up to the Sustainable Development Goal 7 that they have all committed to deliver, but the money has not followed to the point that it needs to follow. So that's one. So a call to action really to governments to step up, because, well, 5.5 years until the goal has to be met, and we have to build it today. That's one. But also a call to action to private sector to work together to break these silos of different use cases, different market segments, and really let's come together under one flagship program as an association We are open to everybody to bring that coordination role and get the infrastructure built, get the money flowing to get energy access done.
Are there other challenges you would like to highlight for the course of this conversation, and ways you think it can be resolved, particularly within the stakeholders, to make your life easier as within the value chain?
Well, I think Area's job can be described as to make our companies' lives easier, right? And so,
yes.
whether it's talking to government, whether that's helping promote business, or have them meet the right people, these are really the point is to be concrete. The point is not to have beautiful high flying words with no action. It's rather the other way around. So one of those things that's coming up now in the context of Nigeria is our annual flagship forum, which is the Energy Access Investment Forum. It's going to be 21 to 23 May in Lagos, and we're going to work with the government, of course, EU, Get Invest, and a bunch of partners that are really going to be quite instrumental into accelerating. I don't want to say jumpstart because Nigeria is doing great, but really accelerate the movement that's currently happening in Nigeria towards access and towards clean, affordable access at that.
All right, I was going to ask you about the conference coming up in Lagos because I'm well aware of that. But with respect to that, I think now we're done. So I'm going to see you in Lagos in that case. Thank you so much, David, for joining us on the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Cheers.
We are a net importer of net zero energy technologies, and our trade balance for some of these technologies is deteriorating. We risk replacing our dependency from fossil fuels with industrial and technological dependencies. This leaves us exposed to the risk of supply chain disruptions, pushes us away from our renewable deployment targets, and ultimately slows down our path to net zero. So, what is the way forward? It boils down to two objectives. The world needs to put in place robust and sustainable global supply chain. We also need strong and resilient local supply chains. This is particularly important for developing countries so they can maximize local value creation, jobs, and economic growth. The EU sees this clearly. And we have been working on a number of different fronts to strengthen our clean tech manufacturing and diversify supplies. First, through our Net Zero Industry Act, we are ramping up investment for manufacturing of net zero technologies in the Europe. Second, we are also keen to ensure a steady and affordable supply of materials critical to the clean energy transition through our European Critical Raw Materials Act. Third, we adopted a wind power action plan to help the wind manufacturing sector build up capacity and quickly emerge from a difficult few years. Fourth, we also want to have people with the right skills to deliver the energy transition on the ground. Job shortages are holding up the transition and hindering the EU's competitiveness. So we are working closely with the industry and education and training providers to implement large-scale training programs. Skills academies on batteries, hydrogen, or solar will help to train or retrain hundreds of thousands of workers. Fifth, we want to strengthen international cooperation and establish strategic partnership with like-minded countries. The initiatives I just spoke about do not aim to build a fortress Europe. Let me make that clear. We very much want an international level playing field where companies can compete fairly. With this in mind, and to join forces with partners committed to the Paris Agreement, the EU will work on net zero industrial partnerships. These partnerships will promote the use of net zero technologies around the world and support investments and technical assistance. They will improve and promote cooperation, know-how and technology sharing along the net zero value chain between the EU and partner countries. They will also help the EU diversify and have a more resilient supply of net zero technologies and their components. Ultimately, This can support nascent industries in the field of clean energy technologies in partner countries with clear comparative advantages. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, let me thank Irina for the important role it continues to play in supporting discussions on these fundamental questions. The stakes are high. This is about our economies and our competitiveness, but it's also about the fate of the clean energy transition and the health of our planet and generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your remarks. Now I would like to invite in His Excellency, Mr. and Felipe Henry, Vice President and the Minister of Climate, Energy, Infrastructure and Mobility, Government of Wallonia, Belgium, to deliver his keynote address. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Vice President, Excellencies, honorable colleagues. I am deeply honored by this invitation. The COP28 showed us that we are collectively able to set a clear direction for the future. It implies an evolution of the entire energy system. These developments directly impact citizens and workers. The last days have allowed us to remember that many solutions already exist and that important developments are already ongoing. In the following of my intervention, I will mention a few of examples, all based on an essential principle. We must work on both renewable energy production and energy demand. In Belgium, and in the Walloon region in particular, we have set up some policies which perhaps could inspire you, because I think it is one of the biggest achievements of IRENA and our international meetings, sharing experiments. First example, we have put in place employment environment alliances that aim to make environmental improvements a source of economic opportunities and job creation. They are based on a continuous participatory development process which brings together and truly involves economic and social partners, business federations, unions, training centers, administrations and ministers concerned, energy, employment, economy. Together, they develop an action plan including support measures, training programs, and professional certification mechanism. Example 2, the Pax Eolienica, as we call it, wind power piece in Latin, is an answer to the fact that some wind farm projects still encounter strong opposition from citizens. The Pax includes measures to improve the social acceptability of wind projects and the involvement of municipalities and citizens. In this spirit, the Wallon government decided to impose to project developers to consult municipalities and citizens who will have the choice or not to participate at least 25% or even beyond. Promoters must ensure that they systematically present their project to the municipal authorities as far in advance as possible of the start of the permit granting procedure. It is also crucial to design a solid and sustainable system relating to the involvement of residents and their financial participation in the project. Example 3, Wallonia is a frontrunner when it comes to collective energy production schemes, such as citizen and renewable energy communities and energy sharing. Since 2019, a dedicated platform related to energy communities, CERACLE, has set up. It provides cross-functional support to initiatives in this field. Around 20 pilot projects and R&D in progress have been monitored. These modes of organizing allow us to foster active citizen participation in the energy transition and increase citizen ownership over their energy supply, all while making better use of our renewable energy capacity and also act on demand side response. Example 4, another priority of our action is the implementation of district heating networks. We have put in place the legal framework, and the call for projects has been initiated with concrete achievements, particularly in some Walloon cities. And moreover, all of Wallonia's energy initiatives have also been implemented at the level of cities and municipalities. We have initiated a program to support the municipal energy and climate plan called POLEC with more than 160 participants. On the training sector, an accelerated transition represents a paradigm shift that also impacts employment and training. It will imply to carry out a profound revision of programs for professions most related to the transition to include new skills and knowledge. Further promote STEM studies and STEM skills within educational programs are fundamental. But moreover, efforts are needed to further increase the number of women and other underrepresented groups in STEM studies. For example, we work on a better articulation between secondary education and higher education, and also since 2022, a new one-year training in deep climate renovation coordinator has been proposed to the professionals of the building sector. In conclusion, I would like to share with you 3 words that I remember after these days: acceleration, human, and participation. The title of this session is Policies and Skills for an Accelerated Energy Transition. For this acceleration to become reality, we have collectively the responsibility to set up an integrated policy approach, including not only energy policy, but also economic, industrial, employment, and training, among others. Secondly, human. We must invest in people, whether on the side of the private sector, which has been suffering for several years from a structural shortage of qualified manpower, whether on the side of the public sector. To achieve a just transition, it is essential to protect the most vulnerable workers by ensuring their access to decent jobs through training and retraining programs. Therefore, the transition needs to be carefully managed all along the way and to be regularly adapted based on learnings and market developments. Finally, participation. I think that we should all implement governance models that serve local democracy by involving companies, citizens as worker or a consumer. Ownership of policies and measures by citizens and all stakeholders is absolutely essential. Without everyone's participation, we will not succeed in the energy transition. Thank you for your attention.
Mr. Harness, thank you so much and for your remark. During the plenary session, we will hear insights from the high-level panel of the speakers on the subject matter. This discussion will be moderated by Miss and Melinda Crane, lead and moderator of the talk show To the Point. Miss Crane is also in the Berlin and Basin moderator and the political commentator with the background in the law and the economics. The panel discussion will be following it by the member interventions. Let me now hand over our moderator, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Vice President, and thank you also to all of our excellent keynote speakers for your opening messages. And as I was listening to the keynotes, it occurred to me that what we're talking about today here is nothing less than the linchpin between 3 words we signed up to at the COP28. And in this case,
With us, a youth in sustainability, doing amazing work with respect to energy and everything in between.
Yeah,
Right?
sure.
It would be good to get to know you a bit more and the work you do. I mean, you do some work around electric motor cycles in
Yeah,
Kenya. Do you
yeah.
want to talk a bit about that?
So yeah, basically, for that, what exactly YNA does is we have electric motorcycles in Nairobi, and it is not only that we are pushing these gadgets or product to the market. What exactly we are doing is we are engaging women for last mile deliveries to the using now electric motorcycles and putting that with a chain of solar powered battery swapping stations, so that you can be able to conserve or to put not putting too much on the grid. So basically, what we say or a component of YNA is also having the digitalization of IoT gadgets in the electric motorcycle and captures the carbon credit that have been avoided uh, by using electric motorcycle rather than the traditional motorcycle. And on these carbon credit, we put them on a blockchain based and using AI for calculation. So that's the general, in a nutshell, about YNA.
I mean, it's interesting to see that a youth-led organization is incorporating both Internet of Things, with incorporating digitization, incorporating technology, which I mean, it's very, very laudable. But what would you say that your key learnings, having tried to implement all of these projects in a climate such as Nigeria? Did I say Nigeria? Such as you stay in Nairobi,
Yeah,
right?
Nairobi,
How
yeah.
has that been for you?
It have been one as a young person having a lot of challenge. One in terms of access to technology, the labor tech, as well as bringing in all these components. Because one, the project is capital intense because you have the hardware, you have the technology. So you find you need more capital, and one some of the investors, most of them, they are not looking onto hardwares. They are going more of software-based technology, and now we had to combine both so that we can be able to be competitive in the capital raising strategy. So on the other end, on the operation wise, most of the challenge that we find is the market also is still at infancy stage, and most of the people doesn't like, or the adoption is still leapfrogging, and we find it maybe in the next 3 years, 5 years, the market will be able to respond well, and also doing a lot of advocacy and also community education so that you can be informed about or maybe the benefit of using electric motorcycles for the businesses and for the users as well.
All right.
Yeah.
I mean, I see that you're doing a lot of work in all of these sectors. However, it's important to also know, as a youth-led business, YNA, is it a for-profit or non-profit?
It is in between. That's what
Okay.
I can say because it's a company limited by grantee, so we can make profit, but all that profit needs to be invested back to the community.
Now I
So
hear that. I was going to say something quickly. So, I mean, I get to speak with young people
yeah.
sometimes, and one thing that I've heard once or twice is the fact that some organizations see some youth-led initiatives as not bankable, not scalable, and so for that reason they would not be financed. What has been your experience regarding this?
So for us, we cannot say that we are not maybe investable because we have been going through investors readiness accelerator. One, we had to open another different arm as an investment vehicle whereby investors they can hold equity in it as a purposely like a vehicle to into the investment. And the second thing we can put in it is the business, does it have like is it scalable, for example, how is the market responding? We are not only when it comes to the carbon credit or maybe the IoT and AI and blockchain, it is not something that we can be able to say it is only for the local. This is something that can be scaled across Africa, to West Africa, Southern Africa, and Central Africa, and even to part of the Asian market, that we can be able to install that gadget in the electric motorcycle and capture the carbon credit. In terms of the delivery using the electric motorcycle, this something can be replicated to any other country. So on these, we say the major problem that we have is the capital intense, or the capital expenditure that is needed to get the hardwares. So that's the main problem that's come in for the investors who feel like cold feet, because the capital is that is needed is quite high.
Thank you so much, Sebastian, for sharing your thoughts with us.
Yeah.
It was good having you here on the program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hard to make sure that we achieve an increased percentage of renewables in the shortest time possible. And for that matter, we are working on issuing a pre-qualification questionnaire. It's like an expression of interest for investors that are willing to invest in floating offshore wind turbines. And we issued also a pre-market consultation for floating solar technology. So the ambition is there, but I would like to reiterate one point, that we'll need to focus also on those technologies that make sense for islands, and the most particular island states.
Thank you very much. No one size fits all. And also, as we have discussed throughout the Assembly this year, significant discrepancies between countries in terms of the generation of investment, the attractiveness to investors. And I'd like to pick up on exactly that point, that asymmetry, and go over to Director Rosar, if I may. Dr. Alfaro Pelico's presentation underlined that asymmetry that has been in focus in so many discussions here. Renewables are still concentrated, investment in renewables in just a few markets. From the industry's standpoint, what are the main obstacles to building efficient renewable energy supply chains in markets that are at an early stage of development, as the Malta minister just described it? And what priority measures would you recommend in that case to maximize benefits such as job creation?
Well, thank you very much, first to Irina, of course, for the invitation, for the question. Indeed, we as the Global Renewables Alliance, where we regroup and really represent the single voice of the renewable energy industry, we approach this very much from the tripling renewables target that has given us common language, a common sign-off on direction of travel just a few months ago. And so we approach it very much from that angle, because that gives us a signal to work with on how we want to organize and how we want to plan that going forward. And in this respect, there's two things that come to mind. One is looking towards public-private collaboration. So on the government side, how is this now being translated into national roadmaps, policies, targets that we can then in turn translate into plans going forward? So an accountability aspect that is very important. And then how can we make progress on the main points of delivery? Because from the private sector side, there is, of course, supply chains. That's a very big issue. There's also planning and permitting. There's also financing. There's also transmission infrastructure. So this is a wider piece of the puzzle that we're looking at, and that we want to approach also jobs, skilling, and capacity building around. It's going to be very important that we look at this from a systemic point of view. And if you consider that target, the emphasis that puts on the private sector side, first to get it all built, and then from the private financiers to get it all financed, we really want to look at it from such a big angle indeed. And if that does take us in that direction, we're going to be looking at 42 million jobs, 42 million jobs in engineering, in project management. It's a very important one, in environmental science and data analysis, O&M, so policy and regulation. And so we need to be looking at workforce development and training, factoring that really integrally into these roadmaps, into the translation of tripling on the ground. We need to be looking at collaboration with educational institutions. And I see a big space, a big opportunity here also for the civil society organizations, for NGO organizations and academia. We see obviously a big role for regulatory and policy support on certification and standards when it comes to those distinct skills across the value chain, and making sure that that is also linking to other sectors. Because I think we all know, or we all have an expectation, for example, no one doubts the jobs in digital that have to be built for the future. We want that to be the same logic, the same expectation when it comes to the clean energy transition.
Thank you very much. I want to take a deep dive on skills in just a moment, but let me stay with the asymmetry, the discrepancy between markets briefly, if I may, and jump over to Hope. And Strathmore has done extensive research on this topic. So share with us what it tells us about the main supply chain challenges that developing markets face to build both on-grid and off-grid technologies, and what effective policy solutions can begin to close that gap.
Thank you so much. So I represent academia, education institutions, and I'm from Strathmore University. And indeed, we carry out a vast range of research on renewables. And our focus is not only in Kenya, but wider sub-Saharan Africa. And we also have a lot of partnerships with European partners. So we compare notes on what we see in our continent vis-a-vis what is happening in other regions of the world. And so one of the things that we have seen from extensive research as an impediment to supply side development of both on-grid and off-grid technology is we're seeing a lot of inadequate and efficient financial mechanism. Yeah, we do not have a robust system that would then attract investors to come into sub-Saharan Africa and invest in both on-grid and off-grid renewable energy technologies. This is because of both the real and perceived risks of investing in sub-Saharan Africa. We're also seeing challenges of very high interest rates. You know, if you compare what we have in sub-Saharan Africa, which is between 13 to 18% of interest rates on debt loans, as compared to 3 to 4% maybe in the EU region, then that's quite high, yeah? And we're also seeing high capital costs, yeah? We see CapEx being driven very high. And even if we look at storage technologies like battery technologies in terms of installation, this drives up CapEx to around 15% more. So these are some of the things that research then shows as impediments to the development of on-grid and off-grid technologies. Another thing that comes out strongly is policies and regulations, yeah? So we're seeing that most African countries do not have a well-detailed and put out policy and regulation mechanism. This means that we do not even know what quality means in terms of installation. We do not know what roadmaps to be followed by different investors. And we have also seen this maybe instigating a lack of interest to some of the investors that are looking to invest in sub-Saharan Africa. As I also say, the lack of standard and quality is a constraint to the growth of the on-grid and off-grid market. And also we are seeing that skills is a major concern when it comes to the supply side of development of on-grid and off-grid market. And I know a lot has been said about skills, and it's also good to mention that in Africa, we have around 12 million to 15 million youth entering the labor market, and we only have around about 3 million decent jobs annually that can then take on these youth that are in the job market. So this leaves around maybe, let's say, 9 million jobless. And we are also seeing that the renewable energy sector is mainly male dominated. So where does that leave, you know, our youth who are women or our youth who are in a minority group? So a lot of things that need to be done in terms of policies is coming up with a very firm and well thought out regulatory system that then would encourage not only international investors to come into Africa to invest, but also guide local investors come on. And then maybe the last thing that I would say is partnerships. A lot has been said about private and public partnerships, but we're seeing the triple helix between the government, education institutions, and also the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we go on, may I just say, dear audience, we are very much looking forward to hearing from you later on in the intervention section of the debate, but we do hear a low rustle and murmur up here that makes it a bit hard to hear each other. So if you would kindly direct your attention this way, I think all of us would be very grateful. It may just be the idiosyncrasies of the audio here in the room, but yeah, very grateful if you would keep the murmur a bit quieter. Let me go now to Director Tyndall for that deep dive on skills and training policies. And OECD has done quite a bit of work in this area. So share with us, if you would, how policymakers can align such programs with evolving labor market demands to ensure that energy transition that is in fact swift, just, and equitable.
Well, thank you very much. And as other speakers have said, it's great to have this opportunity to talk about it. Because I do think that education and skills are not an add-on or a kind of nice to have in relation to the transition to net zero emissions, but indeed a fundamental prerequisite. And I say that for three reasons. First of all, because as we've already heard, without the education and skills, it's not a just transition. And the consequences would be a profound negative impact on vulnerable communities and populations in many ways, some of which have just been mentioned. The second point is, and again, I think this has been alluded to, the social license for governments to pursue that transition to net zero would unravel rather rapidly if the transition is not just, fair, and equitable. And in consequence, as well, the third reason is that the economy suffers. It's not going to be possible to make a transition to net zero and to do it at the speed that's needed if you can't service a green economy. So I think this hasn't been at the forefront of government thinking to date. And it's been rather a focus on the market rather than the socioeconomics of a transition to net zero. And the two need to come together. And from the OECD's point of view, we've been looking increasingly, not using our multidisciplinary approach, not only to look at it from a whole of government perspective, but to go beyond that to apply systems thinking to how you might approach a transition to net zero. So just a few quick points on, first of all, we need to scale up green education and skills training. The analysis the OECD has done shows we're facing a very severe skills shortage in green skills, and that risks slowing down the race to net zero. Only around 4 in 10 adults participate in formal or non-formal learning on the job across the OECD. And I'm sure the numbers are similar or indeed even perhaps lower beyond the OECD. To overcome this, policymakers have to prioritize lifelong learning systems. And that's for the agility and the ability to be responsive to changing circumstances. We've been looking at the transition to a green economy alongside and linked with the digital transition. And I think that's really important to look at those two together when it comes to education and skills training. Focusing on the skills needed to adapt to those twin digital and green transitions is going to help societies anticipate rather than be reactive to major societal shifts. Another point is that the geography of the green transition is clearly going to differ, with different regions being affected differently. So a place-based strategy is going to be vital, with the training needed to align with long-term local economic development strategies and business support programs. We hear a lot, and I couldn't stress it more, that for any of these things, of the green jobs and skills they require as the labour market evolves, rather. So that's key to effective policy design, and as I said, also for course correction when necessary. We've got a long way to go on this. And just as one example, there is no universally agreed definition of green jobs. And just finally then, the OECD is aiming to support policymakers project, climate and economic resilience in a changing world. And that's going to include work on tracking the effects of the transition on skills demand, assessing the adequacy of current career guidance, adult learning and vocational education and training programs, as well as identifying better ways in which we can support the transition. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. And finally, I'll go over to Nina to talk to us a bit about how it is that we bring young people's voices into this debate, because ultimately they, of course, are the main beneficiaries of the energy transition and the jobs that it needs to create. But how do we make sure that they have a voice in designing the strategies and the tools?
Thank you very much for that question. First of all, 2030 is our goal, and of course, by 2030, most of us who are in this youth forum will be the ones who will be leading the energy transition by then. I think that what we are doing now here, having a youth forum with IRENA, first of all, is a really good initiative in that it encourages intergenerational and international conversations and cooperation. I can say by myself from the conversations that I've had with people who have been in these spaces, holding leadership positions in organizations, holding leadership positions in government, have influenced and shaped the way that I think. And I don't think that we value that sort of interaction and relationship enough. I think that this should be beyond just IRENA, but I think that different international organizations should incorporate this idea into their own activities as well, because if you are trying to influence a generation, I think it is important that you have those candid conversations with the generation and let them know your fears, thoughts, ideas and hopes for the future and why we are entering into this transition in the first place. And second of all, I think that it's important to not only incorporate their voices, but also incorporate their talent. For example, we have really intelligent people in the delegation from different countries. And in the youth forum as well, we have people who are actual professionals in the industry who have gone through the system, educational systems, and who have also upskill themselves individually to a place where they can contribute to businesses and contribute to government. So I think that in incorporating voices, we should also be very intentional about incorporating their talent as well into workspaces. And the other thing that I think is really important is we've our panelists here have spoken about that fact that it's not a one size fits all perspective. I'm from sub-Saharan Africa. I've met delegates from, Middle East and Northern Africa. I've met delegates from Europe, and while we may have similar challenges, the root causes of these challenges are not the same. And we have had the chance to have conversations about how, we can tackle these challenges individually, but through our own regions, our own governments. And I think that we must always have that in mind, that a one size fits all approach will not work. And finally, I think it's really important, if we're talking about, raising voices and being serious about things, we should be including youth in budgeting decisions in terms of government, in terms of, private organizations as well have budgets for apprenticeships, internships, and other opportunities where we can learn on the job, where we can gain these new skills, and where we can lead the transition as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to do now a second round that will be a deeper dive on how we try to boost training and education in order to create the kind of foundation that we need for this development. And I want to ask all of you, please, to depart from any notes you may have brought along and simply give us a very concise answer, because we're running quite late and there is a presidential election that will happen in this room shortly. So I'd be very grateful if you can try to shrink what you have to say, in hope that we can then maybe do one last sentence in a concluding round. So deeper dive on skills and inclusion. I'll start here with the minister, and under your leadership, Malta has in fact revamped and extended its skills development scheme in general. Tell us how that applies to education, training, and employment within green sectors, and how you make sure it's inclusive of marginalized groups, including women. We happen to be in the majority here today, not to mention 100%, but that's not always the case. So
I'll try to be clinical in my answer as much as possible. I'll start with what we're doing. So I mentioned the skills development scheme. In Malta, we have an unemployment rate of 2.5%, and that means that the demand for skilled people, for a skilled workforce, is at an all-time high, as you might imagine. So we are making sure to push as much as possible current workforce, but also students that will be the future workforce in those sectors where they are mostly required. You mentioned the skills development scheme, and we introduced the scheme and revamped it, made it much more interesting for enterprises in Malta, because we wanted to make sure that our enterprises have the opportunity, have the financial aid to ensure that workers are reskilled or upskilled, depending on what is required in the market, in the work market, in the employment market. We made sure that for women that go into the scheme, there is an added incentive, so that employers themselves will have that added incentive to actually help women and the most vulnerable to be upskilled and reskilled as well. And when I say we added an incentive, is that the percentage for training that is offered for this particular scheme is higher in the case of women and the most vulnerable. What we are doing as well when it comes to the potential workforce, students. In Malta, we provide a stipend to students. So for those courses where a more qualified, a more skilled workforce is required, an increased stipend is provided as well, because we want to entice students to go in that direction. we focus primarily on the university aspect. We have the Renewable Institute, Renewable Energy Institute, the Sustainable Development Institute, and there are specified courses in that direction. And there is also the technical arm. It's called the Mota College for Art, Science, and Technology. However, I have to mention two areas where I believe we can do much, much
Super
more.
short.
Yes, we need to start from the primary school. Yes, we need to start educating our younger students to start loving STEM, to start loving the science, technology, engineering, maths, and we need to make STEM for girls and women much, much more enticing and interesting.
Thank you very much. Again, I'll jump over to Anna Rosa. And we heard earlier from the UAE Climate Minister the number 13.7. That's global employment in clean energy right now. One global consultancy group has estimated that the skills gap by 2030 could be nearly half that, actually more than half that, could be 7 million. So that's a very significant figure. What does that mean for companies? Where are skills development programs most crucial? Are there particular sectors? And what are the key drivers when you reskill? All of that in a minute.
Perhaps the best way to look at this is to pick up again from the point of how do we approach, how do we make this happen going forward? Because it's picking up on a point that Hope had mentioned on the financing aspect. These jobs, to make them happen, we need to be seeing tremendous amounts of finance going within that. Thank you. We need to be seeing, picking up from Hope's point on financing, we need to be seeing up to $10 trillion going into the renewable energy space to triple. What that means is we need to triple annual investment globally from the levels where it's at today, which, make no mistake, is at record highs. So we are setting steps in the right direction, but we need to triple that on a yearly basis. And that in turn also needs to trickle down and further towards emerging markets and developing economies. Because right now, around 85% of that clean energy investment is going to global north. So there is, you were mentioning earlier, a sort of a disconnect in terms of where that attention needs to go to, where do we need to focus that financing, and where does the job and skill aspect need to come into? We need to be working on that tremendously from a top-down approach. And so here, to understand this going further, I think I've lost my thought. Please. Yes, thank you.
Basically, the question was what it concretely means for employers. I assume it simply slows down the process. It means that they can't move at the speed they would like to. So we can leave that one aside, but where is it most important to concentrate efforts in skills development, education, and training, and reskilling? How challenging is that? What can make it work?
We're going to need to see the majority of the attention go towards the manufacturing capacities, how to expand those also from regional perspectives, how those can be brought out and also scaled up for the years to come, especially if we need to be tripling those, because the financing that's going to come in that, if we get the right signals in that direction, we need to be seeing that go to scale. So it's about supply chains, growing them and bringing them more towards a regional scale. So I'm looking again towards Hope, but how we tackle that from a sub-Saharan Africa perspective, for example, how we're going to grow those local manufacturing supply chains, that is going to be extremely important, and that need to be featured into the policy debate and the financing debate as well. We'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. And if I may, I would go now to Hope once again. And how should service providers working in the area of education and training innovate to meet the skills demands for the energy transition? Please share, if you have them, concrete examples of skilling initiatives that have proven effective.
Thank you for that question. So in terms of innovation to meet skilling demand, we do have the challenge where it's usually said that academic modules are rigid. You know, maybe it takes 4 years to influence or change curricula to actually meet the demand needed in the industry. So a lot of innovation is needed to actually tackle Even if you're looking at the Sustainable Development Goals and new ways of tackling and reaching the sustainable energy goals are indeed discussed every day. So how can academic institutions then meet this demand with a curricula that maybe takes only 4 years to actually incorporate these changes? So one is ability to conduct needs assessment on a regular basis on targeted audience. So what I mean by targeted audience is within respective renewable energy technologies like green hydrogen, geothermal, solar PV, what are the needs, skill needs that exist within these different technologies, and how can we meet them? And as Nina said, it's not a one-size-fits solution. That's why we really need to be specific on what are the needs for the youth, for the existing labor force, both even the old generation who need upskilling and reskilling. What are the needs of women and the minority group in the renewable energy space in terms of skilling? So we need to do deep dives and specifically meet the needs of the specific audiences that we are looking at skilling. And then we also have to come up with customized training programs. We're not looking at your traditional 4-year training program, but if you indeed maybe are an electrical engineer and you need further training in green hydrogen, then we come up with customized modules that would increase your capacity. The other thing is to mainstream sustainability. We have these core units, for example, in academic institutions, where you take maybe a unit in critical thinking, a unit in maybe let's say leadership. So sustainability could be one of these modules that are offered across the board, no matter what discipline you're taking, to raise your awareness and also to sort of show you how to then incorporate sustainability, whether you're from a medical background, whether you're looking at manufacturing business perspective, because indeed climate change does affect all sectors. And lastly, I would say the triple helix, where we insist on partnerships. Private sector, public sector, and academic institutions partnering. So if we have this kind of partnerships where we proactively get feedback from these three actors, then we're going to be able to see what are the entry points to innovate when it comes to skilling in the renewable energy sector. Thank you.
Joe Tyndall, so a statement there clearly underlying the importance of data, which you mentioned as a key element of this. Hope is telling us basically know about the groups that you're trying to bring into the picture. Talk to us a little bit more about your insights at the OECD on diversity and inclusion and how we can be most effective in promoting true equality of opportunity, especially for socioeconomically disadvantaged groups.
Thank you very much. 2 quick points. First, a problem, and then a solution. So we've done analysis that shows that low-skilled workers are over 3 times less likely to participate in training than high-skilled workers across the OECD. So people from socioeconomically disadvantaged backgrounds are also less likely to gain proficiency in a range of skills during formal education, and that obviously makes them much more vulnerable in the case of both the green and the digital transitions. It's worth noting that it's critical for adequate upskilling and reskilling. It's critical to ensure continued support for policy action on climate and the environment. We've got analysis that shows that for every 1% increase in unemployment, the percentage of adults who report prioritizing the environment ahead of the economy declines by 1.7%. So the answer, to pick up on your point, again, I want to stress that to promote equality of opportunity for skills training, access to reliable data and information is essential, both to identify the populations, the communities that don't have the proficiency and the skills they're going to need that will grow in importance, and secondly, to develop effective policy responses to support them in building that proficiency. And again, that does need to be targeted to local net zero economic development strategies. All of this is absolutely key to building system level resilience. And that's because ultimately the outcomes of the environmental transformations are going to be defined by the actions and behaviors of each of us as individuals, of all individuals. Thanks. Thank you very much. And Nina, if I can pose one more question to you. We keep hearing about all the job opportunities that will be out there. How accessible are they in reality to young people? And what do you think is most crucial to make young people aware of these opportunities and essentially do what the minister told us, make this area attractive to young people and girls and women?
Thank you for that question. Um, I think your question is actually three in one. The first part is the accessibility of those opportunities. And the second part sort of answers the first part. The opportunities might exist, there are opportunities, but there is very little awareness of their existence. Some companies may have internship positions, but the openings are only advertised internally or within a small group of people, and so it's very hard for young people to know that these opportunities actually exist. And I think that again, this youth forum is helping to solve that, because even here, young people are able to share the existence of some of these opportunities, including, when it comes to internships. I've already spoken about internships, apprenticeships, but there's also the issue of funding, because we also have young people who are entrepreneurs in the system and are looking for funding but do not know the existence of certain funds or grants that are available for them to access, and or they do not even know how to access those grants or funds. So I think that that is, one problem, which is the access, which affects the accessibility, which is the awareness. We need to do more in terms of sharing that these opportunities exist. And of course, we can always have more grants. I think it is grants and opportunities that are, let's say, come at a discounted price for young people, because we are just starting our lives. And so even if forums like this exist, it might be difficult for young people to access them, because some of them are in different continents far away. And so accessibility becomes an issue for these young people. I think also that, so to address the last part, which is, yes, very briefly, which is how can we ensure that they are aware, and what are priorities in building a skill talent pipeline. I think the first priority is to make it a priority. A lot of people say that they support young people, but they do not have actual opportunities within their organizations to support young people. I think young people need to make those opportunities available. And lastly, I would say that the youth in the youth lounge, we were able to come up with three key areas, which we thought were an impediment in getting opportunities, which was that there wasn't enough career guidance around, because this is a new area and people don't know the opportunities that exist for them, as well as funding, and then finally getting experience. So please take a risk with youth and provide
you.
those opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just look over to our organizers that I can't see right now. Do I have one more minute? One? Okay. So my minute, I would like to use it to ask each of you to finish the following question, but literally only finish it. So we're talking about 15 seconds, okay? What role would you like to see Irina play going forward in accelerating skill policies for the transition? What is the single most important thing Irina can do? Minister?
Provide the right platform for sharing know-how and knowledge, and also promote exchange programs, because we can all learn from one another.
Thank you. Director Tyndall. Keep doing what Irina is doing, providing the foundational data on renewable energy jobs. It's something we refer to at the OECD very often, and looking at that intersection between the market and the socio-economic aspects of the transition to net zero. Ana Rosa.
Make the excellent youth forum ambassadors of the fantastic analysis on jobs, the ambassadors of the renewable energy jobs. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Hope Jagora.
To support the member countries or to link them with the necessary resources to build capacity and skills in the renewable energy sector.
And finally, Nina Somebot Timothy.
I would like to see them use social media to their advantage. They have the resources, but they are not, people are not aware that they exist. So use social media to your advantage in that respect.
Thank you very, very much. I think it's no accident that our panel on skills was 100% populated by very skillful women. Let's give them a very warm round of applause, please, dear audience. And I will not use up any more of our time with an attempt at a summary. I will simply hand back to the chair to continue the session with many thanks to all of you, dear audience, for your attention during our discussion.